Well, good morning. It is great to spend this moment with you, listening to God's Word, and spend this time in worship. And as we do that this morning, I just want to remind us that we are all putting our trust in a God that we cannot see, and yet we believe is with us even now, where you sit, is with us every step of our lives. And there's something truly beautiful about that. Even though we may not see it, God is with us every day that we have. I want to remind us of that as we get into our lesson for today, which is coming from the book of Hebrews. If you have a Bible and you'd like to get that out and be ready, the book of Hebrews is where we have spent the last several months on this journey, a sermon series that travels through each chapter of this book. And we've gotten now to a very favorite part for many of the book of Hebrews, and I'll talk more about that in just a minute. So I believe it was the writer J.R.R. Tolkien who famously coined the phrase, "Not all those who wander are lost." Isn't that a lovely thing to say? Not all those who wander are lost. On family road trips, my dad had his own elegant way of putting this. "Honey, I'm not lost. I just don't know exactly where we are right now." Maybe not quite the same thing. Have you ever been really lost? Like, I don't mean just like missed a turn or missed an exit. I'm talking about where you're really, truly mixed up, turned around, map upside down, or don't have a map at all, like really, truly, helplessly lost. That's a whole different ball game, isn't it? And to tell you the truth, as I was thinking this week and asking myself that question, I came to the realization that, I don't really have that many stories in my life where I have been really, truly lost. Maybe part of that is because most of my life and in my entire driving life, I have grown up in the age of smartphones and GPSs and far from a master of directions. Those things help you from maybe getting aimlessly lost. They don't help me from missing an exit or a turn pretty frequently. But they do keep us, in some sense, from just getting to that point where we're just like, have no idea where to turn. Just feel totally, helplessly unaware of where we are. That's a little different thing. These past few weeks, Alyssa and I have been watching episodes of this show called The Amazing Race. I don't know if any of you have ever watched that before. Probably some of you have heard of it, at least. If you're not familiar, it's a show about... It's kind of like a global scavenger hunt competition. So these teams get into pairs and they race each other all around the world, traveling to these far-flung places that you can barely pronounce and doing these competitions and always searching for the next clue. And at the end of it all, whoever wins the race goes home with $1 million. So it's been kind of interesting for us to watch, especially in these days of quarantine, because here they are, and one day they'll be trekking to some village in Africa, and the next day they'll be searching the streets of downtown Tokyo for a clue, and then the next day they'll be going to some ice fishing town in Finland that you've never heard of. Meanwhile, Alyssa and I, if we get out and drive to Chick-fil-A, we feel like we really had an adventure today. We really got out and saw the world. So that's been kind of fun. We let them do the traveling for us. But I guess you could say the catch of this show, The Amazing Race, is that it takes people like me who have grown up with a smartphone in their hand or a GPS in their car, and it takes away their phone, and it takes away the internet, and it places them in these places around the world where they do not even speak the language, and all of these things are a recipe for getting really, truly lost. And the people in these shows very often get really, truly lost. So what you end up with are these travelers, these adventurers, and they have this hope that they're chasing after. They have this race that they're running and this prize that they're hoping to win. But what they do not have is direction. What they do not know is where they are and where they ought to go. They are wanderers, yes, hopeful wanderers, but they often lack direction. And when you lack direction, it's hard to get where you're going. And it's even harder still to win the race and win the prize. Well, fortunately for us, the race of our faith doesn't have to be like that. And as we get into our passage today from Hebrews, we find many of these same themes playing out before us, but with one critical difference. Our passage for today is a chapter about wanderers, but these wanderers show us what it looks like to wander and not be lost. This is what we find in Hebrews chapter 11. And I would invite you to be turning there if you haven't already. Hebrews 11. Now, I know that as we get to this chapter, for some of you listening, we may now be getting into a part of Hebrews that might be the part of Hebrews that you know the most and maybe even love the best. And if that describes you today, you've chosen well. Because there's a reason that Hebrews 11 has been a favorite chapter for so many people, really a favorite chapter amongst all the chapters in the Bible, because Hebrews chapter 11 gives to us the fullest and perhaps the most moving description of faith that we can find maybe in the entirety of the Scriptures. It's this truly masterful description of faith and those who have it. And what I particularly love about Hebrews 11 is that it not only defines faith for us, but it also shows faith to us through the stories of many faithful people who have gone before us, many of the heroes of faith whose stories the Bible tells. And so we have this common refrain in Hebrews, by faith Noah, by faith Abraham, by faith Moses, and so on and so forth it goes, because it's showing us faith. And for that reason, this passage can be very important for us as well when it comes to our lives of faith, which is why I've determined to do a little mini series here, a little 3-week series within our series of Hebrews, Faith Lessons from Faith Heroes. And all of this is going to be from Hebrews chapter 11. And each week we'll hopefully discover something from these heroes of faith about what faith is and what faith does when we have it in our lives. And today that discovery has everything to do with where we are and where we're going. Today, our lesson about faith has everything to do with the way that you wander about this journey that we call life. Because faith has something it can do for you on that journey. Faith gives direction to our journey in life because faith directs us toward God. Let me show you what I mean. Hebrews chapter 11, beginning in verse 1. I'm going to read a good bit of this chapter to you now, like 16 verses of it. And as I read this, I want you to be asking yourself the question, what is this showing us about how faith gives direction to the wanderer as they journey through their life with God? So here we go. Hebrews 11, verse 1. We read this. Now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. For by it the people of old received their commendation. By faith we understand that the universe was created by the word of God, so that what is seen was not made out of things that are visible. By faith Abel offered to God a more acceptable sacrifice than Cain, through which he was commended as righteous, God commending him by accepting his gifts. And through his faith, though he died, he still speaks. By faith, Enoch was taken up so that he should not see death, and he was not found because God had taken him up. Now before he was taken, he was commended as having pleased God. And without faith it is impossible to please God. For whoever would draw near to God must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who seek him. By faith Noah, being warned by God concerning events as yet unseen, in reverent fear constructed an ark for the saving of his household. By this he condemned the world and became an heir of the righteousness that comes by faith. By faith Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to a place that he was to receive as an inheritance, and he went out not knowing where he was going. By faith, he went to live in the land of promise as in a foreign land, living in tents with Isaac and Jacob, heirs with him of the same promise, for he was looking forward to the city that has a foundation, whose design and builder is God. By faith, Sarah herself received power to conceive, even when she was past the age, since she considered him faithful who had promised. Therefore, from one man, and him as good as dead, were born descendants as many as the stars of heaven, and as many and as innumerable grains of sand by the seashore. Now these all died in faith, not having received the things promised, but having seen them and greeted them from afar, and having acknowledged that they were strangers and exiles on the earth. For people who speak thus make it clear that they are seeking a homeland. If they had been thinking of that land from which they had gone out, they would have had opportunity to return. But as it is, they desired a better country, that is a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared for them a city. Okay. Now I know that was a lot to take in, but I'm wondering, what are some of the things that you were hearing in that passage about how faith gives direction to those wandering toward the promises of God? Could you hear some things in that passage about these wanderers and the way that faith directs their steps? Because for me, what I hear in that passage is that life without faith lacks direction. Or to put it another way, faith is to the wanderer what a compass is to the aimlessly lost. Faith gives direction to our efforts in life. Faith gives us something to set our sights on in life, something to seek after in life, and not just any something, but something of ultimate worth, something of ultimate value. Faith is the compass for drawing near to God. Isn't that what verse 6 was really saying? Verse 6 says, "And without faith it is impossible to please God." And then it goes on to explain what it means by that. "For whoever would draw near to God must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who seek him." So do you see what that's saying? Faith gives direction to our lives because it enables us to draw near to God. Our lives, led by faith, are in pursuit of our God. And without faith in God, that journey simply doesn't happen. Because why would you seek after a God that you do not believe in? And why would you direct your whole life's pursuit toward chasing after a reward that you cannot see? Without faith, you wouldn't do these things. But with faith, now there is direction. If we believe that God is, that God exists, and if we believe that God delivers on the promises that he has made, now we have something more to strive after. Now we have a purpose that is greater. Now we have a direction worth taking. Faith is that compass that directs our steps toward God. And you know this is true even when those around us might not see what we see. After all, what is faith but the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen? And verse 6 just told us that without faith it's impossible to draw near to God. And what faith is believing in a God who we cannot see and believing in a reward that also we cannot see. And if you really build your life chasing after these things, what might others think of that? Well, for some, a life spent pursuing a God and a reward that you cannot see might seem like aimless wandering. And if it seems like that, this is nothing new. Many of the people we meet in Hebrews chapter 11 look just like this to the people around them. They look like those who waste their lives on aimless ventures, chasing after unseen themes. And so in this chapter we meet Noah, right? By faith, Noah, being warned by God concerning events as yet unseen, in reverent fear constructed an ark for the saving of his household. So here's a man whose life is guided by things that he and everyone else could not yet see. And I wonder, what does that look like to all the people around him who, like Noah, cannot see what is up ahead? What do you think a neighbor of Noah would think of his life's venture? Would they call it worthwhile? The man who builds an ark in his driveway. What is he doing? Wasting his life. To those around him, Noah's faith in things unseen might seem like an aimless venture. It's the same way with Abraham also. What about Abraham? By faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to go to a place that he was to receive as an inheritance, and he went out not knowing where he was going. He could not tell anyone where he was going. What is he doing? Where is he wandering? Doesn't it seem like he's just aimlessly wandering? And yet not all those who wander are lost. Abraham and Noah let faith direct their steps. And they let this be so, even though faith was taking them toward things that they could not see. But far from aimless, they were journeying toward God's promises. They were journeying toward something greater. They were journeying toward a city that has foundations, whose design and builder was God. They were journeying toward a better country. That is, toward a heavenly one. They were letting faith be their compass, letting faith direct their steps toward God. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared for them a city. This is what faith can do for you and me as well. Faith can give direction to your life like a compass pointing the way toward a heavenly city, toward a promise of ultimate worth. Faith directs our steps toward God. Now, this is not to say that it will be easy. Nor is it to say that every step along our journey will be clear and well defined. In fact, I'll close with this today. Early on when I was writing this sermon this week, I was using a slightly different analogy for what faith is like. When I was talking about faith, I was not describing it so much as a compass as a road map. Faith is a map for the aimlessly lost. But then later I decided to change it to compass. And the reason I made that change is not because God has not given us clear directions, because he has. What does 2 Peter 1 say? But that God has given us everything that we need for life and godliness. And when we look to God's word, we find in it remarkably clear direction and timeless wisdom about how we are to seek him, what we do to respond to the gospel, how we ought to obey him with our lives. So those are not the reasons I made this change from map to compass. God does give us clear directions. And yet there's also this sense in which the life that we live in this world is one where the future to us is still unknown. And even though God has given us clear directions on how to be faithful to him, what may come tomorrow in our lives is not always clear. So I made this change to faith as a compass, because I don't want to suggest that when we have faith that it makes everything in your life, every next step in your life, crystal clear and easy, and that walking by faith is like knowing what tomorrow holds and having a GPS let us know what the next step's going to be and what the roadblocks are that might arise along the way. That's not what faith is it? That's not what faith was for Abraham, was it? Abraham dealt with so much unknown on his journey toward God. Abraham's had so many twists and turns and long delays in his journey of faith. And yet, faith still directed his steps, did it not? Maybe not with the crystal clear ease of knowing what every tomorrow will hold, maybe not with that kind of certainty, but still with assurance. Faith is the assurance of things hoped for. And the assurance that faith gives is kind of like a compass, aligned to true north. It may not tell you everything about the road that is spread out before you, but just as surely as true north is true north, so also God will keep his promises. And if we carry faith with us, like a compass directing our steps, no matter where we may wander in life, we will not be lost. Maybe today you need to take a step of faith in your life. Faith, we have read today, is what enables us to draw near to God. And if you believe, like that verse says, that God exists and that he rewards those who seek him, maybe it's time for you to seek him in your life and let faith direct your steps in obedience to his word, to surrender your life to him, to be baptized in his name. There's no greater response of faith than that. Maybe for others of us, we need to remember our compass and let it be our true north. As we go through steps in life that might seem uncertain or unclear to us where to turn, maybe we need to trust that faith in God can be our guide to unseen promises that are worth the journey. However you may be challenged today, let's resolve today to let faith direct our paths as we sing this song of encouragement.